Americans spend, on average, 25.8% of their monthly income on housing costs. Many blame capitalism or Wall Street landlords like Blackstone for soaring prices. But does the evidence support that? While Blackstone gets much of the blame, the firm owns less than 1% of U.S. housing. In reality, individuals own over 70% of the market. So, blaming private equity is an oversimplification. Economically, high rents stem from two forces: too much demand and too little supply. In free markets, shortages balance out over time. Yet in housing, two government interventions block that natural adjustment: rent control and land use regulations. First, rent control. Economists have long shown it distorts supply. Artificially lowering rents increases demand while discouraging new construction, creating shortages, causing rationing on the part of consumers and divestment on the part of developers. As German economist Konstantin Kholodin, 2024, found in a meta-study spanning 1963 and 2023. As a rule, rent control leads to higher rents for uncontrolled dwellings. The imposition of rent ceilings amplifies the shortage of housing. The demand for unregulated housing increases, and so do the rents. This explains why crowded living situations are common in rent-controlled cities. But the bigger culprit is land use regulation. Zoning laws, permit delays, minimum lot sizes, and height restrictions. These rules act like a regulatory tax on new housing. Studies constantly find that housing regulation shapes the housing landscape, adding significant time to not just development, but extensive time to just get permission to develop. That is assuming an existing provider doesn't lobby through "not in my backyard" policies to have your development request denied. A National Bureau of Economic Research study, Gyourko and Malloy, 2014, found that regulation raises house prices, reduces construction, reduces the elasticity of housing supply, and alters urban form. Economists Glaeser and Gyourko, 2003, quantified this. In Boston, regulations account for the 20% of housing costs. In Los Angeles, over 30%, and in San Francisco, upwards of 50%. Studies also find that while there is local market variation around this aggregate time series, construction costs have been essentially flat in real terms over the past 30 years. This trajectory is consistent with the idea that any inelasticity of housing does not have at its root an inelasticity of the supply of the structural component of homes. This, of course, relays the reality that the issue is not organic to the market economy in the case of housing development, but that specifically the state's intervention in the housing sector is at fault. Additionally, the ails of land use regulations are not an issue endemic only to the U.S. The United Kingdom, in particular England, is dealing with its own housing affordability crisis. Research from Hilber and Vermeulen, 2016. We use data from over 350 local authorities from 1974 to 2008 to explore this question. Our findings strongly suggest that regulatory constraints are the main culprit. In our estimates, house prices would have risen by about 100% less in real terms between 1974 and 2008 if, hypothetically, all regulatory constraints were removed. Compare this to Japan, where zoning is far more liberal. Most development happens as of right, without long approval delays. As a result, fully renovated homes can sell for as little as $129,000. While similar homes in California cost 6 times more. In contrast, South Korea has one of the strictest zoning regimes in the world, and its median home price is 40% higher than Japan's. NR's 2017. Even within the U.S., the story is clear. In 2023, Austin, Texas repealed single-family zoning laws, abolished parking minimums, and slashed lot size requirements. Within months, 62 new housing developments were filed, and median home prices began to fall. McGlinchy, 2024. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, rigid zoning and permits keep housing scarce and expensive. The evidence is overwhelming. It isn't market failure driving high housing costs. It's government-imposed restrictions, rent controls that choke supply, and land use regulations that inflate costs. Or as economist Brian Kaplan once asked, why doesn't New York City have 60 more skyscrapers than it does? Blame land use regulations. Housing isn't unaffordable because of markets. It's unaffordable because we don't let markets work. All scholarly citations will be linked below, and please consider joining my Patreon for access to my full library of scholarly works for only $3 a month.